important thing. If you remember, that'll be good. If you remember that, everyone is going to benefit it. Because how Prabhupada explained the difference of bhakti and worshipping Shiva and Krishna, that'll always help.
Right, he was saying that, did you already cover it or no? I was gonna say, he was saying that when people approach worship Shiva, it's usually with some material desire or with intent to receive something, where people who are bhakti, you approach Krishna out of devotion with no expectation of anything in return.
Right. Okay, so we will start today. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhisesa Sunyavadi Paschyata Desa Tarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We also read about the judge, right? We also read about the judge. Prabhupada wanted to create this confusion. He was very confident that he can resolve the issue, which is an ongoing issue in Madras, and not in Madras, Tamil Nadu, about this discrimination and different differences between Smarta Brahman and other people. He wanted to set an example. He wanted to give him the initiation. What is the High Court? Mr. Ramakrishna? No, not Ramakrishna. He was, remember anyone name? What is this person's name? Tell him, yeah.
Is it Veeraswamy?
Yeah, he was high judge, right? He was High Court judge.
Yeah. I think Veeraswamy, we just passed it. Like he was the Chief Justice.
Yeah, Chief Justice. Yeah. So this is the one, right? Yeah, but I don't see the name.
I think next paragraph.
Yeah, Veeraswamy, a Brahmana. So he was willing. Prabhupada was willing to give him if he takes a little tea. Okay. Okay, this is the explanation about Mayavad worshipping Shiva and Vishnu, Lord Krishna. Reverend Swamiji, who wrote this one envious god brother. Okay, Srila Prabhupada's most acute controversy in Madras was not with Smarta Brahmins, Mayavadis, or Saivites, but with some of his own god brothers. Look, some of his own god brothers. And although some of them acknowledged Srila Prabhupada's incomparable preaching in the West on behalf of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, others were envious. One envious god brother wrote to Srila Prabhupada in Madras. What did he write? Reverend Swamiji, I listened to your discourse on bhakti at Rajeshwari Kalyan Mandapam on the 12th instant. I am filled with doubts on the following. Your disciples dance with Hare Krishna mantras. 1. Are they really got intoxicated as Lord Chaitanya? 2. Have you Swamiji really got free of your ego? If so, why you said I challenge, and why are words like I and my always on your lips? Why do you use a cushion unlike a real yogi? Did Lord Chaitanya use cushions? 4. Why do you wear ring and a wrist gold watch? 5. Not 5. Are you not free from material attachments? 5. Did you visit Lord Chaitanya Krishna temple at Gaudiya Math? If not, why not? The purest Vaishnava cult is indwelling there with pious Swamijis, with Lord Krishna dwelling therein. Melodious sound from your throat is absent but a Jarsing, six undivine comes out. Either any divinity in your person, I doubt, one disgusted on hearing your speech. Can you believe? What a deep hatredness is there. That to Prabhupada's God, brother. Although Srila Prabhupada was surprised and hurt by the extreme virulence of such a letter, he was accustomed to his God brother's slights and insults. He forbade his disciples, however, to get involved in fights with his God brothers, fights with his God brothers. Rather, they should simply avoid them. He said that persons who criticized the spreading of Krishna consciousness movement were useless and that he should push on. The dogs may bark, but the caravan will pass. In contrast to the venomous letter came a letter from Tridandi Swami B.B. Puri Maharaj, another of Srila Prabhupada. Oh, BB, because B.B. Puri Maharaj is very favorable. So it says, in contrast to the venomous letter came a letter from Tridandi Swami B.B. Puri Maharaj, another of Srila Prabhupada's god brother. Puri Maharaj, as Prabhupada called him, had a small ashram in Visakhapatnam on the Bay of Bengal between Madras and Calcutta. Hearing that Prabhupada was going next to Calcutta, Puri Maharaj invited him to visit. With innumerable satsanga, Dandavas at thy lotus feet, I beg to acknowledge the kind letter. The citizens of Visakhapatnam are very anxious to have the darshan of your holiness. We are exceedingly glad and eager to hear Sankirtan and the divine message from your holy lips. I hope the Sankirtan movement at Madras is attracting thousands of citizens. Again, with Dandavas to all the Vaishnavas, I remain Dasanu Bibi Puri Mahapuri. Do you know who is Bhakti Baba Puri Goswami Maharaj? He is Prabhupada's god brother, disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he's from Berhampur, my hometown. And he established a lot of mutts, in Orissa and Andhra Pradesh and few other in Vrindavan like that. And now look at the enviousness of that person and the devotee. What did you? I mean, look at the words he has written, and I feel bad to repeat those things. But envy, even after so much of sacrifice, envy is the one which is called indirect appreciation. You appreciate something on someone, but you don't want those things you appreciate, but you don't want them others to have it. Why not me? And even after practicing so long, and we see that this disease doesn't go away very easily. That's why we are not finding fault that he wrote this, but we can learn from this. We can learn from this. I don't know how can I read this anyway. His name is what is his name? Okay, I don't know if he wrote his name or let's see. Did he write? Okay.
I don't think so. I think the name is not there.
Yeah, and but they didn't put problem. It's intentionally they didn't put. Prabhupada and disciples are very conscious of this thing, how to handle. So they didn't put. So bad. But on the contrast here, and Prabhupada didn't, he's used to of all this thing. He is very focused. He Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement to grow in speech, and he did not bother about all this hate speech and all this thing trying to pull it down. He continued. Prabhupada said, dogs may bark, but the caravan will pass. And B.B. Puri, Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Goswami Maharaj is Prabhupada's disciple, god brother, his well-wisher, and he's the youngest one. And he actually left the planet very recently. I won't say recently in the sense maybe 6-7 years. He was the youngest one. He was still there in this planet. All Prabhupada's god brothers, everyone left the planet. And he left only, I think, 5, 6, 7 years, probably not more than that, if I remember. And he invited very humbly, "Oh, look at this. Thy lotus feet, I beg to honor the kind. Citizens of Visakhapatnam are very anxious to have a darshan. I remain Dasanu, BV Swami. He's not envious of BV Purimal. He's not envious of it." Okay, Jay. Yes.
I was going to say, as we've read, I've wondered that because they often reference Prabhupada's God brothers, and I you cleared it up on with the one from your hometown, but I always wondered, like, are they doing anything during this period of time, or are they all just kind of right? Because the last time they were talked about in depth, they were just arguing over property and land rights and all that. So it's good to hear that some of them, like the one you referenced, are were still out, spreading Krishna consciousness and actually doing something, where it sounds like a lot of them just kind of sat back and criticized and didn't do much.
No, actually, everyone did according to their own way.
Okay.
See, here's the thing, that it's not that we should be trying to independently. It's more important that anybody can do it. More important that is cooperating, uniting for a higher purpose. That's the envy.
Yeah.
Unity will be lacking in the age of Kali. They did. Everybody had their own different center. I think they're still going on. Their disciples are going on. But that's very easy. You understand this deep of, I was sharing with my family when I was talking to them. I said that it's easy to be compassionate to someone else, but it's difficult to appreciate someone's progress. It's very easy to be, have a compassion, not daya, to be, what do you call, pity on someone. Because we feel somebody's lower and it's very easy we can, but we won't feel comfortable someone is doing better than us. Because the envy is there. It's very difficult to appreciate when someone is growing. And in spiritual practice, it is very, very important for our growth. Now that's why we see now, everybody wants to do separately, very good, but no one, it's hard to unite, bring them, to be higher purpose. It's very hard. Everybody can be a preacher, but the one who actually understands that mode, uniting, that's very important. My understanding is, you can read it.
Thank you. Start me off with a tough one. Visakhapatnam. One more time.
Visakhapatnam.
Okay. Visakhapatnam, February 17th, 1972. A broad beach of white sparkling sands in the Bay of Bengal's warm, clear waters were special features of Srila Prabhupada's visit to Visakhapatnam, Puri Maharaj's small ashram where Srila Prabhupada stayed. It was only 5 minutes from the ocean, and every morning Prabhupada and his entourage of about 15 devotees would take long walks along the seashore. Yamuna. I don't think Prabhupada ever excluded any of us from going with him to the beach. All the devotees knew at which time Srila Prabhupada would be taking his walk, and we would come out from our different quarters and follow him to the seashore. The walks were brisk and refreshing and full of talk about Krishna. Somehow or other, we were all able to hear Srila Prabhupada speak. Gurudas. I always went on every morning walk, but one time I was sitting in the temple when suddenly I saw Prabhupada and the devotees going towards the beach. I immediately ran out of the temple to join them, without even taking time to get my shoes, but there were barnacles and rocks leading down to the beach. When Prabhupada saw me coming, lifting my feet up high, painfully hobbling down the rough road, he looked over and said, "Oh, your feet are hurting. Why aren't you wearing shoes?" And I said, "Prabhupada, when I'm with you, I don't feel any pain." Prabhupada stopped and said, then why don't you cut your throat? Everyone laughed and I laughed also. He said, "There's enough tapasya. Why create your own?" Guru Kripa. Prabhupada would talk philosophy on and on. There were many things I couldn't understand. I would just listen anyway, although I couldn't remember anything. I would just hear and hear, but it hadn't registered yet. I used to walk behind him on the beach, and I figured that if I can't follow his teachings or example yet, at least let me step in his footsteps in the sand. Vasaka. Sometimes a dog would try to follow us or would bark at us. We were all surprised to see how Prabhupada would flick his cane and the dog would run away. Once when we passed a cow on the road, Prabhupada gave her ample room to pass and told us the story of how he had been gored by a cow shortly after he had taken sannyas. Tejas. Once on a morning walk, Prabhupada was speaking about the dog. He gave a reference to a shloka by Chanakya Pandita about the 5 good qualities of a dog, that he is very faithful and satisfied with anything. And soon Prabhupada said we should be Krishna's dog. He was also speaking about how our pujari should never be paid. The teacher and the pujari should never receive a salary. They must work in pure devotion. The Kshatriya also. He said that was the mistake of government today, that Kshatriyas were being paid. He discussed so many things one after another. Sorry, my eyes aren't working well today, apparently. So Prabhupada and the devotees are staying at the ashram on the beach, or well, close to the beach, a couple minutes from the ocean, it sounds like. And he and his devotees, about 15 of them, would go walking every day out on the beach. And then, the different devotees kind of recap the stories. And, so Yamuna tells of how everybody would just, like, it doesn't sound like anybody, like Prabhupada ever invited people to go walk with him. They just all knew when he would do it, and he'd all just come. They'd all just join him, and he never said no. I said, and, they would always, go out and talk about Krishna and enjoy Prabhupada speaking. Then Gurudas, tells a tale of when he was, one day he was sitting in the temple and he sees Prabhupada going out for his walk, and and he forgets to put shoes on, and he's running down the beach and his feet are getting cut up on the rocks and the barnacles, and Prabhupada says, "Hey, why are your shoes, or why are you hurting?" And Gurudas says, "I don't, when I'm with you, Prabhu, I don't feel anything. It's I'm good to go." And so Prabhupada says, "Well, if you don't feel anything, why don't you cut your throat?" And he said, "There's enough sacrifice and suffering. Why add to it? Why make your own?" Guru Kripa talks, says he couldn't really understand what Prabhupada was saying in terms of the philosophy. He didn't understand all the ideas. So he would just listen, but he couldn't ever remember what he said. So he said, what, if I can't quite understand what he's saying yet, if I can't follow his teachings or his example, at least let me just follow his footsteps, follow behind him. And then, sometimes dogs would follow, and Prabhupada would just kind of flick his cane at them, and they'd scatter. And one day they encountered a cow on the road, and Prabhupada gave him plenty of room, and then told them about a story of how he was gored by a cow when he was, right after he had taken sannyas. And again, talking about dogs, he was referencing a shloka by Chanakya Pandita about the 5 good qualities of a dog. Specifically that he's faithful and satisfied with anything. And then Prabhupada said that, the devotees should desire to be Krishna's dogs, right? They should be satisfied and faithful to Krishna, satisfied with whatever they get. And then he said that how, the pujari should never be paid and teachers should never receive a salary. It's a work of devotion, so they shouldn't expect, fruitive returns from it. And that was one of the issues with the government, was that, the government class was being paid, and that kind of put, they put their job in front of their duty at that point. They put the benefits in front of their job. So.
Did you all see what did you notice in Guru Kripa's? It appears like he was not very conscious of it. Do you all see what he was doing?
He was following in his footsteps.
Sorry?
He was following the footsteps. He was following Prabhupada's footsteps.
He was not following footsteps. Read properly.
At least let me step in his footsteps in the sand.
This is wrong.
The exact same path, putting his feet where Prabhupada's feet had been.
That's wrong. One should not do it. Because the spiritual master is none different than Krishna. And rather, this dust supposed to be worshipped and taken to the head. But he was acting like a child. So we think that he was following footsteps. No. This is not, and disciples never do like this. These are the small things. It shows we should be consistent with. Yes, I can read.
Nandakumar, Srila Prabhupada would tell us to go bathe in the ocean, go to the beach, he would say. So one day I asked him, Srila Prabhupada, whenever I go down to the beach, the sun is warm on my body, the water feels so good, the sand, it seems like such a comfortable material situation. How should I understand your reason for asking us to go to the beach? I know the spiritual master never gives the disciple anything that will cause him to become material attached, but always gives him whatever he needs to remember Krishna. But when I go to the beach, it seems I just enjoy my senses. How can I relate that to Krishna? How can I understand that this instruction is for my spiritual benefit? Prabhupada said, the sun is there, Krishna is the light of the sun. The ocean is there, Krishna is the taste of water. You are surrounded by Krishna. How can you forget Krishna? He's all around you. Panchajanya. I was a new devotee and I asked Prabhupada, what about swimming? Srila Prabhupada, is that not Maya? Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya used to go swimming all the time. He used to play ball, so you can go and swim. Just make sure you remember Krishna. Puri Maharaj ashram was a simple single-story building of about 8 rooms. When he offered Prabhupada a room next to his own, Prabhupada was pleased, accepting it as an expression of friendship. Prabhupada relaxed with his god brothers, Puri Maharaj and Ananda Brahmachari, speaking with them in Bengali. Puri Maharaj said he appreciated Prabhupada's work and his Western disciples. Prabhupada's disciples had already seen formal exchanges of obeisances between Prabhupada and his god brothers, as when in Bombay they had seen Prabhupada get off his Vyasasan and offer dandavats to his god brothers. But in Vishakhapatnam they saw more intimate dealings. They saw for the first time Srila Prabhupada living comfortably at ease in the same quarters as his god brothers, and they didn't feel themselves being treated condescendingly or superficially or being regarded as oddities. Through Prabhupada's guidance, they began to learn more of the essential, friendly, and humble exchange between Vaishnavas. So here, one day, Nandakumar asks Prabhupada. Prabhupada would tell everyone to go to the ocean and take bath, and Nandakumar would say that when I go to the beach, it feels like I am. It is for material enjoyment, and it seems all comfortable. And he says a spiritual master never asks a disciple to do anything that will give him, that will bring him more material attachment. But how do I understand this? And Prabhupada says, Krishna is the light of the sun, and the ocean, Krishna is the taste of water. So you are surrounded by Krishna. So how can you forget Krishna? And Panchajanya asks Prabhupada that what about swimming? Is that not Maya? Is that not like enjoying? And Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya used to go swimming all the time. So you can go and swim, but always make sure you remember Krishna. And Puri Maharaj Ashramam in Vishakhapatnam was a simple single-story building with 8 rooms, and he offered Prabhupada a room besides his own. And Prabhupada was relaxed with his god brothers Puri Maharaj and Anand Brahmachari. He was speaking with Bengal, and there was a mutual friendship between them, and Puri Maharaj appreciated Prabhupada's work and his Western disciples. And Prabhupada's disciples had seen in Bombay, that Prabhupada used to get down from his Vyasasana and offer dandavats to his god brothers. But in Vishakhapatnam, they saw more intimate dealings with Puri Maharaj, and none of them were they were not being treated condescendingly or superficially. And all the devotees understood, like from Prabhupada's example, that how to have friendly and humble exchanges within Vaishnavas.
Prasanthi, please.
Prabhupada's godbrother Ananda was eager to cook and served not only Srila Prabhupada but all his disciples. Ananda was elderly, and yet he took the position of always offering menial service. Although he spoke very little English, Prabhupada's disciples could perceive the affection of Ananda and Srila Prabhupada for each other. Ananda's communication with Prabhupada's disciples was particularly through his cooking and serving prasadam. Each morning, everyone would gather on the veranda outside Prabhupada's quarters, the men sitting on one side and ladies on the other. Down the center aisle, Ananda would walk briskly, distributing prasadam, where Prabhupada sat at one end in a wooden chair, fingering his japa beads and observing the devotees take prasadam. Prabhupada had supplied money to the ashrama, and Ananda was regularly cooking sumptuous feasts. Deep fried chunks of potatoes in powdered spices, rice, yogurt, dal, three different types of sabzis, French fries, chutney, malpura, rajkeli, sandesa, shira, and everything cooked to a nectarian standard of excellence. Prabhupada would sit at the head of the two rows of devotees and encourage them to take prasadam. Give him more. Prabhupada would praise Ananda's cooking, smiling with pleasure to see his disciples accept prasadam. The devotees would finish, having been induced to eat so much as they possibly could, and Srila Prabhupada would say aloud the Prema Dvani, that all the devotees would shout in response, Jaya. After one, after one such feast, Prabhupada called the devotees into his room and remarked, "See how he is cooking. He cooks everything. He serves it, and then he doesn't eat until everyone is fully satisfied. This is Vaishnava, how he should act. He is more satisfied to serve than to enjoy himself." The feast continued twice a day, and in the evening many guests arrived to take prasadam, chant in Kirtana, chant in Kirtanas, and hear Srila Prabhupada lecture. One day, Srila Prabhupada took his disciples to see a famous temple of Lord Narasimha, Sri Simhachalam, on top of a hill about 5 miles north of Vishakhapatnam. Thousands of stone steps led up the hill to the temple, which was situated in a natural amphitheater on the side of the hill. Prabhupada said the temple, which was now run by followers of the Ramanuja sect, was particularly important because Lord Chaitanya has visited there on his tour of South India. Srila Prabhupada chose to approach the temple by car, riding up the winding road past orchards of mango, jackfruits, and cashew, and fields of pineapple. On arriving at the temple, Srila Prabhupada and his disciples met one of the temple brahmanas who showed them around the grounds. The temple buildings were of black granite and carved into the rock were the forms and pastimes of Vishnu. But the forms and pastimes of Vishnu, especially in his incarnation of Lord Narasimha. As Prabhupada moved from place to place, building to building, he sometimes rode up steep stairs on a palanquin carried by 4 men. I think it is down. Yeah. So Prabhupada's god brother Ananda was a cook, and he was cooking for Prabhupada and also his disciples. And he's always offering menial service too. And he is acting as a pure Vaishnava. And he is communicating to Prabhupada and his disciples through his cooking and serving prasadam. Every morning, Prabhupada, at the Prabhupada's quarters, men will sit on one side and ladies will sit on another side, and they all take prasadam. Ananda will serve everyone, and Prabhupada he cooks very big feast, like with 3 sabjis, rice, yogurt, and also many kinds of sweets, and everything is cooked to the standard of excellence. And Prabhupada would also ask the devotees to take more, and everybody is induced to eat as much as they can. And Prabhupada would say aloud, Prema Dhvani, and everybody would shout Jaya. And Prabhupada remarked that he is acting as a pure Vaishnava because he does not take prasadam unless everybody is has finished their food and they are fully satisfied. So, so he is acting as a pure Vaishnava, and he asked his disciples also to learn from it. And the feasts are served twice a day. In the evening, guests would arrive for taking prasadam. And Prabhupada took his disciples to Simhachalam. It's the Lord Narsimha temple, and it's north of Vishakhapatnam. It is particularly important because Lord Chaitanya had visited. So in the temple premises, actually, the feet of Chaitanya is also installed. And in one lecture, I have heard that the Narsimha Arati we sing every day, that is actually done for the first time by Lord Chaitanya over there in that temple. And Prabhupada came by car. Their temple have a lot of area, acres of land. So they had a lot of farm like cashews, pineapple, mango, jackfruit. And then Prabhupada also met the temple brahmanas. The temple is being conducted by the Ramanuja sect, the followers of the Ramanuja sect. And he also moved from place to place and building to building. Disciples carried him in palanquin and in the steep stairs. That's all. You're on mute.
Yeah. It is one funny thing I noticed when I was in South India Yatra, and especially I think recently I was in Visakhapatnam area. So in India, become the Holy Land, in every place, sometimes you will find the Lord's temples in the mountains, and Lord temples in the mountains, and then even the forest. Why? Wherever the Lord appears, that's the Holy Land. And wherever the devotees go, that becomes the Holy Land. That's why on land, it can be on land, it can be on water, it can be on mountain. One funny thing I noticed that mimicking these temples, which are many times in South India, in hills are there. Some Christian missionaries also, they build their churches in the mountains. Yes or no? You all noticed? I see very high areas they have built it. I don't know if you have noticed or not. And then I was thinking how weird it is. Okay, you build it, but you're just imitating the Hindu temple. The reason they build on the mountain is that some pastimes took place. Whereas you're building the church is just to compete with them. So the superiority or all these things. Just that it came to mind. You don't just build out of show passion a temple and something a certain place. Where Lord manifests, so that's where you and that temple becomes temple. And Vaishnava goes, desires, that's where it becomes temple, not just like that. Just wanted to share all of you. Okay. Vijayanand Prabhu, please read.
When Prabhupada came upon an immense banyan tree at the lower end of the temple grounds, he said that the tree must be thousands of years old. As he stood beneath the tree, his servant Nandakumara handed him a small champaka flower. Extending his thumb and forefinger from his bead bag, Prabhupada held the champaka flower and looked fondly at it. This flower, he said, is the color of Lord Chaitanya, and this flower is the most loved all over India. This flower is beautiful to look at and beautiful to smell. He carried the small saffron gold flower between his fingers throughout the rest of the morning. When Prabhupada and his group entered the inner sanctum, where the deity of Lord Narsimha resided, their guide explained that the Murti dated back to the time of Prahlad Maharaja. An ancient king named Pururava and his consort Urvasi had once visited this hill, and at the request of Urvasi, the Murti who appeared to her in a dream had been excavated. The Lord had ordained that he should be worshipped in this place, but that he would give darshana only one day a year during the month of Vaishaka. The rest of the year he would be entirely covered with ground sandalwood pulp mixed with camphor and other scents. Therefore, the deity now appeared to be only a lump covered with a layer of sandalwood. Prabhupada commented that the sandalwood was to keep the deity cool-headed. Madhavananda. When Prabhupada was at the Narasimha temple in Vishakhapatnam, it was the same as when he was in Vrindavana. When he got out of the car, he was very grave. We went into the temple and there was a chamber. Then we went down and the walls were 4 feet thick and it seemed like hundreds of feet of tunnels before we got into the inner sanctum. There was a deity with just a more of sandalwood paste on him. As soon as we entered, Prabhupada said, begin chanting the Narasimha mantra. So we started singing Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam. And we circumambulated the deity. Then we stood before the deity and Prabhupada offered obeisances. Guru Kripa. When we came into the deity room, Prabhupada had us sing the Narasimha prayers. He always manifested such devotion. That was what separated him from us. Not only his learning or his knowledge, but his devotion. In these places, we would see him become very silent, very grave, and he would speak such peace would fill us from within. When he would speak, you could feel it. He was constantly convincing us of Krishna consciousness, not purposely, but he was just being himself. In these places, it would come out. When Prabhupada stood with us before the deity, we could not even see. There was just a mound of sandalwood. There was one Brahmana with big earlobes and he had a ring in his ear. We offered some money, but it was a very devotional time. Prabhupada did not say much, and the main reason was that these places are appreciated according to one's spiritual advancement. The details and facts and the history are not really that important. There is nothing really to Prabhupada, would just make sure we had the proper respect and did not commit any offense. So here Prabhupada came to the banyan tree which was present at the lower end of the temple, and he mentioned that this temple was like 1,000 years old. And when he was standing beneath the tree, his servant Nandakumara handed him a small champaka flower, and Prabhupada was explaining the significance of the champaka flower. So Prabhupada mentioned that this flower is the color of Lord Chaitanya, and it is the most loved flower all over the India, and it is like beautiful to look at and beautiful to smell. And all over the day, rest of the morning, he carried that saffron gold flower between his finger. And when Prabhupada and the group entered into the inner sanctum, where the deity of Lord Narasimha resided, the guide explained that the Murti dated back to the time of Prahlad Maharaja, and it was like an ancient king named Pururava and his consort Urvasi once visited this hill. And at the request of Urvasi, the Murti appeared her in a dream, which was excavated, and Lord has obtained that this place should be like an worshipable place, and Lord will give darshana only once a year, and during the month of Vaishaka, and the rest of the year he will be entirely covered with sandalwood and pulp mixed with camphor and other scents. And now at the time of their visit, the deity was like in the lump covered with a layer of sandalwood, and Prabhupada commented that the reason the deity was with sandalwood is because to keep the deity cool-headed. And Madhavananda was mentioning that Prabhupada, like at the Narasimha temple in the Vishakhapatnam, he behaved as if he was in like in Vrindavana. When he get out of the car, he was grave and went into the temple, and there was a chamber, and there was like hundreds of feet of tunnels where they get into the inner sanctum, and the the deity was like mound of a sandalwood paste on him, and Prabhupada as soon as reached there, he requested everyone to begin chanting the Narasimha mantra, and then the circumambulated the deity, and they had offered the obeisances. And Guru Kripa mentions here, like whenever they come to the deity room, Prabhupada sang us the nursing of prayers, and he manifested like much devotion, like a lot of devotion. And that was thing that was like separating Prabhupada and his disciples, not only his knowledge or his learning, but his devotion. So in these kind of places, Prabhupada remained very silent and very like grave, and he would just speak uh, in such a way that peace would fill from within. And when Prabhupada speaks, everyone will feel that. And he was constantly convincing his disciples of the Krishna consciousness, and not purposefully, but just being explaining all the significance of the places. And Prabhupada stood before the deity, they were not even able to see the deity because it was like a large mount of sandalwood, and there was one brahmana with the big earlobes, and they offered some money, and it was like a very good devotional time. And Prabhupada did not say much because these places are appreciated according to the spiritual advancement, and the facts in the history are not really important. And so Prabhupada just made sure that everyone offered proper respect and they did not commit any offense.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada would lecture in the evening, speaking sometimes at schools and social clubs in Vishakhapatnam. During the program at the Ramakrishna Hall, where more than 1,000 people attended, Srila Prabhupada's dancing induced the entire audience to dance. The devotees danced in a ring around Srila Prabhupada and the Kirtana continued for an hour. At another program, a bearded American anthropologist rode up on a motorcycle to attend Prabhupada's lecture and Kirtan. Afterward, the anthropologist told Srila Prabhupada that he had come to India to study the primitive tribes. Prabhupada told him it was simply a waste of time. Why do you want to study the primitive people? He asked. Why don't you study the exalted people? And Prabhupada narrated a story. One time, a poor man roasted a cob of corn and then began picking off the kernels one at a time and eating them. In this way, it took him many hours to finish. He did this, Prabhupada said, because he had nothing else to do, just to pass the time of day. In the same way, the study of anthropology was simply a waste of time, Prabhupada asked. Why don't you study some person or group of persons from whom you can learn something? During the day, Prabhupada would sit outside his room and enjoy the atmosphere. He wore no shirt, and his healthy body shone with a golden luster as he sat drinking freshly pressed sugarcane juice. This is just how it is in Vaikuntha, he said. There is always a very cool, pleasant breeze. He often walked about chanting, talking about Krishna, listening to the devotees' kirtans, and observing the activities of the temple. Repeatedly, Prabhupada invited Puri Maharaj to come and preach in the West. He requested him to at least come to Mayapur for ISKCON's international gathering of devotees. Prabhupada felt that Puri Maharaj, on seeing all the Western disciples, might feel moved to join him and preach. Puri Maharaj agreed to accompany Prabhupada to Calcutta and Mayapur, and the pleasant week in Vishakhapatnam came to an end with Prabhupada, his disciples, and Puri Maharaj looking forward to traveling together to Calcutta. Should I continue, Prabhu?
Yeah, you can finish this one.
Guru Kripa. Although we arrived at the train station early, the train was already at the platform. It was very hot, and 5 or 6 of us were having kirtan. Then Shyam Sundara climbed up a coconut tree and got this fantastic coconut. He opened it and gave it to Prabhupada, who proceeded to drink a lot. Then Prabhupada gave it to Shyam Sundara, and Shyam Sundara drank. Then Prabhupada said, give it to Kirtan members. Each man in the Kirtan group was so thirsty that he wasn't even thinking of leaving any for the next man, but would just pass this coconut around. And the thing wouldn't empty. I tilted it up, and the coconut water was coming out, pouring on my shirt, and I was drinking and drinking, but still it wouldn't empty. We were amazed. Prabhupada was smiling and we were chanting. We all became cool and satisfied. So Prabhupada in Vishakhapatnam was preaching in schools and social halls. Um, and uh, several people attended, and everybody was inspired by Prabhupada dancing, and then everybody started dancing, forming a ring around Prabhupada and performing, doing kirtan. And then at a different program, um, an American anthropologist attended Prabhupada's lecture, and then he was telling Prabhupada that he came to India to study, or he went to India to study the primitive tribes. But Prabhupada was explaining to him that it's just a waste of time to study primitive people, rather study some exalted people where he can benefit something out of it, and gave the analogy of a poor man, picking the kernels from a roasted corn and eating them. And Prabhupada said, it's just waste of time, just killing time. So, um, and then Puri Maharaj was there, and Prabhupada asked Puri Maharaja to travel along with him. So then he requested at least come with him to Mayapur. And then finally Puri Maharaj agreed, and they all decided to go to Calcutta. And at the train station, Guru Kripa explains that they reached early. It was pretty hot, and there was a coconut tree, I believe, right somewhere. And Sham Sundar Prabhu climbed up and then gave the coconut to Prabhupada. Then Prabhupada drank a lot of it and then passed it on to Sham Sundar Prabhu and to the other Kirtan members. And there was so much coconut water coming out of it that it would never end. And then all the devotees had the coconut water, some of it pouring onto their shirts. And they were all amazed just at how much coconut water would come out. But they were all happy. Prabhupada was smiling and chanting. And everybody felt very satisfied and cool in that scorching hot weather.
Yes. Prabhupada is sharing also this mode. Everything is Vaikuntha. Nepa?
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Shyamsundara. Prabhupada and I were in a first-class railway coach, a private compartment of 2 persons, clackety clacking through the warm Indian night, somewhere between Vishakhapatnam and Calcutta. Prabhupada was talking and joking and playing tapes until around 10:30 p.m. When he lay down to take rest, for a while I switched off the lights. At about midnight, Prabhupada sat upright and called my name. Shyamsundara, take dictation, he said. Then followed a train of thoughts so lucid and coherent that I could only conclude that while we think Srila Prabhupada is sleeping, he is usually not sleeping but is thinking, reflecting on ways to serve Krishna more and more. So here Shyamsundara and Prabhupada are traveling in the first class railway coach, which is a 2 compartment for 2 persons, private compartment for 2 persons. And he's describing the sound clackety clicking through the warm Indian night between Vishakhapatnam and Calcutta. And Prabhupada was talking and joking and playing tapes until 10:30. And when he was resting, and for a while he switched off the lights, Prabhupada, and about midnight he got up and he sat upright and called Shyamsundara and asked him to take dictation. Then followed a train of thoughts, like so lucid and coherent, that he says that while Srila Prabhupada looks he's sleeping, he's actually thinking always and reflecting ways to serve Krishna more and more.
Very nice. Thank you. Syam Sundar Prabhu, which, I think we all should read his books, knowing well how long he served Prabhupada's personal secretary. And with this, we are finishing this chapter. No one listens to a poor man. I think it was a pretty big one we did. Nipa, you can read the next also. Any quick, maybe at the end, maybe we can have reflections at the end then.
Krishna, I was gonna say real quick. So Shamasundra is going to be on that Wisdom of the Sages podcast on Sunday. I can send the link to you.
Oh, is it? He's going to be?
Yeah, they're going to interview him on Sunday.
Nice. So now you know, you will appreciate the person after knowing, right? Otherwise, if you do not know, say, okay, who is he? Very nice. Nipa, you can continue reading this also. Chapter 39.
Chapter 39, I will build a wonderful temple for you. Prabhupada had postponed the Mayapur cornerstone laying ceremony until Gaura Purnima, the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya, February 29, 1972. He had requested a big festival with a pandal and free feasting for guests. His disciples from all over the world would attend. I want very much to hold this function this year with all of my students. It is a very important day and it will be a great service to Srila Bhakti Vinoda Thakur and to his son Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So please arrange for this program. Shall I continue, Prabhu? In December, when the war had broken out between India and Pakistan over Bangladesh near Mayapur, the Indian government had forbidden foreigners to stay in the northern area of West Bengal. The devotees had vacated, returning a few weeks later when the war had ended. They had continued arranging for the festival, and a few days before Gaura Purnima, Prabhupada arrived to stay with them. When Prabhupada saw a banner on bamboo poles, "Welcome Srila Prabhupada," he remarked, "I don't know if my god brothers will like this." He had already heard that some of his god brothers objected to his taking the same title as their spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. He had not actually taken the name, but his disciples had given him the name a few years ago in America. In May 1968, while in Boston, Prabhupada had been dictating a letter and had mentioned to his secretary that Swamiji was a third class title for the spiritual master. Then why do we use Swamiji? His secretary had asked. I'll summarize, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's little above.
I thought you don't need to see your student.
I'm not as great as other disciples yet. Prabhupada had postponed the Mayapur cornerstone until Gaura Purnima, which was the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya, February 29, 1972, and he had requested a big festival like a pandal and free feast for guests, and his disciples would come from all over the world to attend. And he wanted to hold this function this year with all his students. It was a very important day, and it would be a great service to Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur and to his son Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And so he requested to arrange for his program. In December, when there was a war between India and Pakistan over Bangladesh, which was near Mayapur, the Indian government had asked the foreigners to stay in the northern area of the forbidden the stay for the northern area of West Bengal, and the devotees had to vacate and return a few days later when the war had ended. They continued arranging the festival, and a few days before Gaura Purnima, Prabhupada arrived to stay with them. When Prabhupada saw the banners on the bamboo pole saying, "Welcome Srila Prabhupada," he said, "I don't know if the God brothers would like this." He had heard that some of his God brothers objected to his taking the same title as his spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. And he had not actually taken the name, but his disciples had given him this name few years ago in America. In May of 1968, when he was in Boston, Prabhupada dictated a letter and mentioned to his secretary that Swamiji was actually a third class title for the spiritual master. And then the question remains, then why do we call you Swamiji? His secretary asked.
Very nice, thank you. Ajay, you please.
In December, when the war had tricked me. The spiritual master, Prabhupada had replied, is usually addressed by names like Gurudev, Vishnupada or Prabhupada. May we call you Prabhupada? His secretary had asked. Prabhupada had replied yes, and his disciples had switched from Swamiji to Prabhupada. One of the devotees had inquired further from Prabhupada about the meaning of the word and had published a statement in Back to Godhead magazine. Prabhupada. The word Prabhupada is a term for the word Prabhupada is a term of the utmost reverence in Vedic religious circles, and it signifies a great saint even among saints. The word actually has two meanings. First, one at whose feet, pada, there are many Prabhus, a term meaning master, which the disciples of a guru use in addressing each other. The second meaning is one who is always found at the lotus feet of Krishna, the Supreme Master. In the line of disciplic succession through which Krishna consciousness is conveyed to mankind, you lost the last sentence there for me. There you go. The number of figures of such spiritual importance as to be called Prabhupada. Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada executed the will of his master, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and therefore he and his associate Goswamis are called Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur executed the will of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and therefore he is also addressed as Prabhupada. Our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad 108, Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, has in the same way executed the will of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada in carrying the message of love of Krishna to the Western world. And therefore, we American and European humble servants of His divine grace from all the different centers of the Sankirtan movement have followed in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada and prefer to address His Grace, our spiritual master, as Prabhupada, and he has kindly said yes. Everyone concerned had been happy about the title Prabhupada, and no one had foreseen the envy the name would uncover. How would Prabhupada compete for the honor due his own spiritual master? He was fixed as the human servant of his spiritual master. So the disciples, Prabhupada was saying, typically, a spiritual master is called, maybe Gurudev or Vishnupada or Prabhupada. And his secretary said, well, I guess Shyama said, can we call you Prabhupada? And he said, yes, that works. And so they stopped calling him Swamiji and began calling him Prabhupada. And to kind of spread that announcement, right, that going forward we'll be referring to Swamiji as Prabhupada, they wrote a statement for Back to Godhead, which kind of explains the meaning behind the word, behind the title. And says, Prabhupada is that kind of one of the highest names you can refer, titles you can give somebody. It's a saint even among saints, right? A great saint even among saints. And pada meaning one at whose feet, and Prabhu. It says first one at whose feet there are many Prabhus, and the second meaning being one who's always found at the lotus feet of Krishna. And then it explains how some of the other people in the disciplic succession that have been addressed by the title of Prabhupada, including Prabhupada's own spiritual master, I believe, right? So they said, hey, going forward to all the different Sankirtan centers, or all the different centers in the Sankirtan movement, we will address His Grace, our spiritual master, as Prabhupada from here on out.
Okay. Saikiran Prabhu.
In line of disciplic succession through which Krishna consciousness is conveyed to mankind, there have been a number of figures of such spiritual importance to be called Prabhupada. Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada executed the will of his master Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and therefore he and his associate Goswamis are called Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur executed the will of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and therefore is also addressed as Prabhupada. Our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad 1083, Sri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, has in the same way executed the will of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada in carrying the message of love of Krishna to the Western world. And therefore, we American and European humble servants of His divine grace. I think he went up. of divine grace from all the different centers of the Sankirtan movement have followed in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada and preferred to address His Grace, our spiritual master, as Prabhupada, and he has kindly said yes. Everyone concerned had been happy about the title Prabhupada, and no one had foreseen the envy the name would uncover. How could Prabhupada compete for the honor due his own spiritual master? He was fixed as the humble servant of his spiritual master. The members of ISKCON saw no harm in calling the spiritual master Prabhupada, and there could be no stopping them. He was their Prabhupada. They had even printed A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada on their invitations for the Gaur Purnima festival. But Prabhupada knew it would raise the eyebrows of certain of his more critical godbrothers. When inspecting the living accommodations for the devotees, Prabhupada found spacious white canvas tents, one for the men and one for women, with fluorescent lighting inside. A large bundle tent stood in the center of the other tents, and a small tent in the rear served as kitchen. Immediately surrounding the small compound were rice fields. The ground therefore was slightly moist, and the wet fields bred large mosquitoes which emerged at sunset. Conditions were primitive, but many of these devotees were the same disciples who had traveled with Prabhupada for a year and a half in India, sometimes living in the dirty dharmashalas with bare rooms and sometimes living in cold tents in Allahabad. The devotees had not come to Mayapur to be comfortable but to serve Prabhupada. In future years, by the result of their efforts, many devotees would be able to gather comfortably in Mayapur in the spacious buildings Prabhupada was planning. So here, about Prabhupada, the word Prabhupada is explained, and there have been multiple figures in the parampara of Krishna consciousness where they were called Prabhupada, and here it says Srila Rupa Goswami was executed the will of his master, and therefore he and his associate Goswamis are Prabhupads. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur executed the will of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and therefore he is also addressed as Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada executed the will of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then he is also addressed as Prabhupada. And it says they would not change it for anyone. Like they would call Srila Prabhupada, they would call Prabhupada because he brought the message of Krishna to the Western world. And everyone was happy about the title Prabhupada, and no one had foreseen the envy it would uncover. And also they all knew that Prabhupada was basically an humble servant of his spiritual master, so there was no question of competition here. And so the members of ISKCON never saw any harm in calling their spiritual master Prabhupada, and there was nothing to stop them. And they also had printed out all the pamphlets and everything with the A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And Prabhupada knew that it would raise the eyebrows of some of his godbrothers who were critical of him. And for the Pandal program, they were Prabhupada was inspecting the arrangements. So there were two white canvas tents, one for the men and one for the women. And there was a large Pandal tent. There was a small tent in the rear which served as a kitchen. And beyond these were all rice fields. So the ground was moist. They were wet, and they used to be large breeding spots for mosquitoes, and they used to come at sunset. And even though the conditions were a little bit primitive, the devotees, they were the same disciples who traveled with Prabhupada for all over India, and they were accustomed to living in conditions which were not favorable. So they had come to Mayapur to serve Prabhupada and not to be comfortable. And in the future years, because of their efforts, everyone would be able to gather comfortably in Mayapur in the plans that Prabhupada had.
This is amazing, huh? All these people, they could spend time, live or whatever it is in Mayapur with all the fields, ready field in all not very good condition, mosquitoes, so much of tolerance. Well ever that Westerners were unaccustomed to the austerities of living in India, Prabhupada wanted to provide facilities to his disciples so his disciples could feel comfortable and be able to focus their stay in India on spiritual life without distracting inconveniences. Therefore, he was pushing them to help in various ways to establish a Mayapur building with running water, electricity, and other conveniences. Prabhupada's dwelling was a simple thatched Bengali hut, about 12 feet square, with a dirt floor. A thin partition divided the main room from the servants' quarters. In front was a small veranda, and in back a garden where Prabhupada could sit and take massage. Also in back were a hand pump for bathing and an outhouse. When the devotees apologized for offering Prabhupada such a humble residence, he replied that he liked the natural simplicity. Even if you build me a biggest palace, he said, still I would prefer to live here. While living so simply in Mayapur, Prabhupada spoke of his vision of a grand project yet to come. Although the devotees of Radha Madhav, whom he had worshipped at the 1971 Ardha Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, right? With the same deity, you all remember? Were installed in a tent. He spoke of a marble palace. He also spoke of a first-class accommodations for guests and devotees. Although as yet he had little offer. Living simply and happily in his thatched hut, he gathered his disciples together and told them of his plans. At his request, devotees had built a small model of the proposed first major building, and there were also drawings of the proposed temple of human understanding. He wanted to build a Mayapur city, he said, with quarters for each of the 4 social classes of the Varnashram institution. So, okay. This one, you already discussed this one, right? Planning. Did you already discussed?
Yes, Prabhu, yeah, that one I discussed.
When inspecting the living accommodation, you already read,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, so I read very little then. So Westerners, Prabhupada's, even though all the devotees were taking austerities, but Prabhupada's mind is how he can keep the disciples comfortable because they're accustomed to Western world. Now also, if you see them, there used to be many ashrams. They would make very simple ashrams. They used to make other Prabhupada's God brothers. But Prabhupada didn't compromise in the quality so that devotees can stay comfortable without being, feeling uncomfortable, inconveniences, and focus on bhakti. It's only at this time everybody is taking austerities for our benefit, so we all can spiritually grow, take advantage of it. So now Prabhupada's dwelling was a simple thatched Bengali hut. Okay, AJ disappeared, he's saying. I didn't notice that. The power went out. So he was living in a small, they made a small hut and a hand pump for bathing and a small garden. You can see the quality of service now, and you can see the quality of service what they offered in the past. They're unbelievable. In Americans, the way they did it. So Prabhupada, they were saying, apologize, we are offering you this simple way. So Prabhupada said, I like it very much, natural, simple. Even if you're offering a big palace, I still prefer, because that's where the heart of a devotee is. Vaishnava is always lives in his mind and heart in a simple way. But on the other hand, he is giving the plans for the vision. For himself, he wants a small hut, but for others, he wanted to, for the deities Radha Madhava. We already 844. Huh? Radha Madhava was installed. You remember at Ardha Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, and also they worship Radha Madhav in which place? You know, this Gita Press. That's where they installed the worshipped Radha Madhav. Now he's saying that he wants to have a big, accommodation, first class accommodation, and living, and big buildings and everything he's talking about. And Temple of Human Understanding, which is called TOVP now, Temple of Vedic Planetarium. So all these things he has planned, he's revealing to the devotees. So with this, we will end it here today. We will meet tomorrow. We are late. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.